everyone, and welcome back to Fantasy Fellowship YouTube, where we have a very exciting author interview in store for you today. My name is Sarah, and I am thrilled to be here with best-selling author of the Fantasy Fellowship favourite, Licanius Trilogy, and new release The Will of the Many, which is the first book in his new Hierarchy series, James Islington. So I finished this book this morning and can honestly say it's one of the best first in series that I've read in years. I've been left absolutely reeling by the ending. So I'm just so excited to talk to you about it, James. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So I think this actually comes out in the UK this week.
I believe it's today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's obviously been out in I believe it's been out in audio and Kindle since May 23rd, but the hardcover is out today.
Yeah, it's a beautiful cover.
Yeah. I was very pleased with how that came out.
So first of all, can you just tell us about where this series came from and how long you've had the idea? Was it something you were thinking about while still working on Licanius?
Yeah. Look, it really came about because I wanted to do something different from Licanius. So I got to 2019, and I hadn't really been thinking about what was next. But it got to 2019, and I'd handed in the final draft of The Light of All That Falls, and my agent emailed me going, "Oh, so what's next?" And at that point, I'd been doing Licanius for 8 years, I think. Obviously not full time, but I'd been sort of working in that world since 2011, and I kind of went, it's time for a change.
Yeah.
And so I really started. I made that decision, and then I really started thinking about, okay, well, if I'm going to do something different, I want to do something different. I don't want it to be a Licanius copy, essentially. And so a lot of the decisions came from that. So the decision to go a bit more zoomed in with the first person perspective, that was very much it felt like a natural extension of trying to push myself a bit as an author, doing something different.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking about, okay, well, if I want the world to feel different, maybe I should base it in a historical culture. And so I started looking at that, and then I already had some basics of the magic system in my head. That was something that had kind of been in the background while I was doing Licanius. And when I started looking at Rome, that just ended up being just a perfect fit, because Rome was very hierarchical in nature, and that was perfect, and so those concepts kind of meshed perfectly. And then I started doing research, because my history wasn't as great as it could have been. So I started looking into that, and I got a lot of inspiration from just researching. That was probably the major inspiration for that. And I mean, that there are other inspirations as well. Like I know online, I've seen a lot of the reviews say it feels like a bit of a mix between Red Rising and Name of the Wind, and that's perfect, because those are two of my major inspirations. Like, I love both of those series, and when I was writing this, they're obviously both first person perspective. They've got similar aspects, and I really wanted to try and get in some ways replicate the feel of those books, but obviously still doing something new and different. But yeah.
Amazing. So you only started working on it in 2019?
Yeah. So it so I actually finished this book. I actually finished mid 2021.
Wow.
And what happened was, because I think just with the pandemic, with everything getting really just backed up in the book industry, I think.
Yeah.
So I submitted it in July 2021, and we didn't get around to editing it until May 2022. So I had this really big, it was almost a year's worth of, I won't call it dead space because I did stuff, and I did start work on book 2, but there was this period where I was going, am I going to have to make major changes? Is this work that I'm doing on book 2 gonna
That must be torture.
It was, it really was. It was this, and you know, it's just, it was really the only thing. Like I can't complain about you know, how life has managed to treat me during the pandemic, because being an author already, you know, I was used to working from home. It really, I was very fortunate, very fortunate compared to a lot of people. So you know, a delay in that is you know, really not that big a deal. But it certainly affected what I was doing for almost a year. So I'm not as far along, I think, as I could have been if we'd gotten onto editing quickly. But having said that, book 2 is coming along really well. So I'm really hoping to submit it. I'm hoping to submit it in December this year for publication next year.
Exciting.
So yeah.
Honestly, that's like crazy that you've just said that, though, because while I was reading it, I was thinking that you must have been planning it for years and years, because there is just so much. There's so much detail, and there's so many like rules and like the hierarchy, the magic system, the world. It is huge. But I don't know how you put that together in a couple of years.
Well, it's funny because you know, obviously, I was saying before, I was like, no, I'm gonna do something different from Licanius. So I'm gonna move on to something new, and this is gonna be great. And I'm gonna stretch myself as an author. And then I started maybe July 2019 in just the planning phase. And the first few months, I was just sitting there going, have I made a gigantic mistake? This is so hard. I'd just forgotten, because, you know, it had been 8 years since I'd tried building a world.
Yeah.
And I had all these ideas, and I was like, okay, you know, you constantly throwing an idea at it and going, this isn't meshing well, this isn't gonna work, and discard that. And there's at least a couple of months, probably a few months, of just going, oh, this is a mess. And then, but then eventually, you know, like, and this is the benefit of being experienced as a writer now, is that you can continue, you push through, because you go, okay, well, I've done this before. I know that this is a frustrating period, but I know that this will eventually work itself out. You just got to work at it and refine and refine. And then once I had the ideas really, you know, locked down, the story really flowed quite naturally from there. And so, and I have it all. I have the entire series very much planned out. And the way I tend to work, and I did this with Licanius as well, is that I'm very much in between a plotter and a pantser. I like to have the skeleton of where I'm going. I need to have direction and purpose when I'm writing, I think. Otherwise, I become very aimless, and I can come up with cool ideas, but it doesn't go anywhere. But if I don't allow myself room to adjust as I write and come up with those new ideas, then that usually falls flat as well. And that's just something that, you know, it's obviously different for every writer. Something that I came up with when I was writing Shadow of What Was Lost. You know, I tried just going off the top of my head, and that didn't work. And then I tried doing a really strict plan, and that didn't work. And again, it's just that iteration of going, okay, you're just trying things until you figure out what works.
So you must have like so much fun, because you're like a master of twists and like just absolute like coming out of nowhere shocks at the end of every chapter. So that does that like reveal itself to you as you're going along? Then you just start laughing to yourself. But
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, a lot of the time, I think the twists are things that, again, because I've got that skeleton of what I'm doing, and twists are, they're very much about when you reveal information. And so I can go, okay, this is a cool idea, and then I go, oh well, you know, if I leave this piece of information until this point in the story, then that's
yeah,
going to have the
okay.
most impact. And so
Yeah.
it's great because it's not so much that I reach that point and go, oh, this would be cool. It's more of a look ahead and go, yes, this is the point where I should reveal this information for maximum impact.
Okay.
But it is fun. It is fun for
Yeah.
sure. Like those are always I think the most exciting scenes to write, where you're like, yeah, this is gonna affect people in some way. So
Oh, definitely.
yeah.
The amount of times that I was like reading on my lunch break and then having to like get into the end of the chapter and being like, no, don't do this to me. I've got hours until I can read again. So we have touched on it, but I was like expecting high fantasy, but I was really pleasantly surprised that the book transcends like several different genres. There's a touch of
Yeah.
sci-fi, mystery, and obviously there's that huge Roman history influence. Was there any particular like, because there are some big events that happen in the book, was there any like particular Roman events that you looked into, or because they were very bloody, weren't they? Very violent.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I knew, like, I mean, it's one of those things, like, you know, I went through the histories and you go, oh, you know, this is great, this will work well, and then a lot of other stuff you go, oh, this is kind of cool, but I cannot make that work in this world.
Yeah.
And you know, so for example, one of the things I went, well, if I'm going to do Rome, you have to include some sort of gladiatorial combat, right? Because it's so iconic. And but I had this issue for a while going, but the whole purpose of you know, the hierarchy and their entire the way they operate is to keep people alive, because people are essentially the power source of magic.
Yeah.
So wasting them in gladiatorial combat is pointless.
Yeah.
And so that was something where I went, well, no, I really want to make sure that, like, I want to have this in my book. I want to think about how this would work. And so you know, that was like with the Naumachia, and obviously, you know, stuff happens there, which I, you know, won't go into for spoilers, but yeah, there's definitely, there's nothing, no specific battle or anything like that I specifically went, yeah, I want to include this. But yeah, I just generally took inspiration from, you know, I listened to a lot of the audiobook histories.
Yeah.
And so I reckon in the end, I listened to about probably like 50, 60 hours worth of Roman history.
Amazing.
And it's so good, like, as you know, as it should be, because it would be boring for me otherwise. But it's so interesting.
Yeah.
And it's another reason I was really glad that I did end up, that Rome worked so well, because I was really interested in the Roman history, and so learning about it wasn't a chore.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
And like obviously the magic system is such a huge part of the story, and I love like the moral questions around it, and especially the way that Viz, our protagonist, reacts to it. So how much is that going to, like, I know you can't really like go into spoilers or anything, but like, is that going to remain such a big part throughout the series?
Yeah, it is. It's certainly, this is the book where it will be the most prominent, but
Okay.
it will continue to have a pretty key role moving forward. That's kind of all I
Excellent.
can say. but yeah, it's definitely something that I I really like you said, because it raises um, really interesting kind of moral questions. So I do enjoy having those in books.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, and so yeah, I definitely want to keep that there and keep exploring that.
So how hard was that to build? Like, I've completely ignored my questions here, but how hard was that magic system to build?
Uh, Actually, that was surprisingly. I want to say it was easy. I don't know whether it was because it was one of the first things that I had in my head. It actually, so one of the inspirations for it was, have you read David Farland's Rune Lords series?
No, I haven't.
No. Um, so I read it about 20 years ago, and admittedly, I don't remember much of the plot or the characters, but the magic system really stuck with me. And it was this magic system where people could give up aspects of themselves, so like their intelligence or their strength, or their voice, or whatever, to their lord, in exchange for protection or food, or shelter for their family, or whatever. But it was this really great abstraction of a feudal system. And one of the things, like over the years, like, because I loved that magic system, and I'd always kind of wondered what that might look like in a more advanced, structured society. And so I kind of had this idea of the pyramid structure of the magic system has been in my head for years and years and years. And I hadn't, again, it was one of those things that it was ticking away in the background. I definitely couldn't, it didn't fit into Licanius at all. So it was very much sort of on the side there. And then it was only when I was asked the question, what's next, and sort of had to start coming up with something new, that I went, oh yeah, I've got this magic system here, and I'm really interested in pursuing that, because again, because it's got those moral questions to it. I find that so much more interesting than, I mean, there's nothing wrong with a magic system that just goes, here's a resource. This is
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is you use this resource, and that's how magic works. Like, there's nothing wrong with those, and I love those stories. But more often than not, they don't have a large moral aspect to them. Whereas this one, when humans are the power source, and they're nominally part of it willingly.
Mm.
Um, and the question of, well, if you're contributing, how responsible are you for the actions of those
Yeah.
above you? Yeah, I really enjoyed the moral aspect of it, and so there was, yeah, it was definitely the magic system and the idea that I really sort of zoned in on when I was thinking about new ideas.
It's crazy how well that magic system works with that, like, Roman based setting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It
Crazy.
was it was so, yeah, like I said, when I started looking at the historical cultures, and I just went, oh man, Rome's, this is perfect. It fits together so well. And it's kind of rare. Like, I think when you're writing, you very, very rarely have those moments where you're thinking about a story and you just go, yes, yes, this is perfect. This is exactly what I want. And that was one of those moments.
Oh,
So yeah.
amazing. So when did Viz come into it then?
Um, well, it was because you sort of have this, you have the hierarchy, you have the empire, and you're sort of thinking about, okay, well, I want to tell a story about I like having hero protagonists. I like having moral protagonists. And so I started with a base of, well, who would be interesting to follow in this world. And um, it actually started a little bit as a revenge story, and this is very, very, very early on in concept, where I was like, yeah, revenge story, that'd be great. And then I was talking to, I was actually, she probably doesn't remember this, but I was talking to my wife, and it wasn't specifically about this, but she was like, oh, man, I hate revenge stories.
Wow.
And I was like, aha, yeah, all right. And and I mean, it's not that she hates stories that have vengeance in them,
Yeah.
but that are purely revenge driven. And then, that made me sort of think about it a bit and go, you know what? Yeah, no, I get that, and they can be a bit one dimensional, and they can be hard to finish in a satisfactory way.
Yeah.
And so I really kind of went from that. So I sort of had that concept of Vis and his background, but then I really started to not soften it a bit, but just again, it's kind of more about making him a moral protagonist and making him think through things, and then just trying to exist in this world as well, where I think it would have been very hard to write this story where he was purely just driven by that motivation. He needed more than that.
Yeah.
And so I think it would have ended up evolving into something like it did anyway. But it was a very it was an early cutoff, because I went, well, I guess I'm not writing that.
That is amazing. So the plot is non-stop. I could never have imagined when we first met Viz back at the start just how far the book would go, especially for the first in a series. And when I hit the halfway mark, I did actually just sit there and think, like, I cannot believe how much has happened already. I was expecting like a magic school for the whole book.
Yeah.
And poor Viz does not have an easy time of it at all. So
No.
like I know you kind of mentioned it before that you work in between of a plotter and a pantser, but all the stuff that you did to Viz, everything he went through, like, were you expecting him to have that hard a time of things?
Yes and no. I mean, there were definitely a couple of points where I was writing and I kind of stopped and I went, he's having a hard time of it. This is rough.
Yeah.
And in some ways I think that's an effective, it's almost, that's what the story needs, because he's very bright. Like he's quite a a smart and talented character, and you don't want to, like, I love super competent protagonists, but you still want them to struggle, right? You still want them to feel like they're in danger. You don't want them to, you don't want the reader to be feeling like, it's he's got a thing in front of him, but it's fine because he's basically superhuman. And so you really do want to put him through the ringer a bit. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it is the major stuff. I very much had plotted out, but yeah, certainly some of the spur of the moment stuff was probably made it rougher for him as well.
I had goosebumps at the end when he goes back to the academy and says that line. Yep. Oh, cannot wait for book 2. So yeah, another one of my favorite things, which is actually really funny because I've been buddy reading it with my friend, and literally like every hour we're like sending messages with like another person that we're like, do we trust them? You just cannot trust like anybody. Like, it's given me massive trust issues because I just don't know. Like, I don't think there's one character other than Viz that I'm like 100% And there's so
Yep.
many that I'm like, please, please don't betray him. But so did you know who to trust?
Yeah. No, I've definitely got my I know who should be trustworthy and who
Okay.
shouldn't. But I very much, I mean, this is first person present tense, is that it does really give you that in the moment perspective of this. And you're right, he just doesn't know who to trust. And it's it's very much something that I focused on, because I really wanted to, I guess I wanted to convey, he's obviously not physically alone, but he's kind of
Yeah.
emotionally very alone. And that's obviously very hard. And I mean, I've got a family, but I was writing this during the pandemic. We were locked down.
Mm.
And that really influenced, I think, kind of how I approached that, because everybody in the world was
Yeah.
just about feeling some sort of sense of loneliness at that point. And so, trying to convey some of those, not in a direct correlation sense, but just in a, in an emotional sense, I guess that was one of the things I was looking to do with that.
And I think you can really feel that, and that's what makes the friendships just like so lovely. They were so nice. Like, were they really fun to write?
They were, I think they were probably my favorite parts to write.
Yeah.
I think that, I think it's something that I'm not sure. It's not that I didn't do it with Licanius, but just having those, I really enjoyed writing those quieter moments, where they're just being friends, and there was still plot related stuff going on, but it wasn't end of the world stakes or anything like that. It was very personal.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really enjoyed writing that, for
Yeah.
sure.
And like the school setting, we all love reading a magical school setting. Like, how fun is
Yeah.
that to write?
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good, and it's so great because, um, I understand why it's so popular now, because it gives you so many options for storytelling, and it's also just so relatable.
Mm.
Like, I think especially for fantasy, you think about settings that have all these relationships and potential conflicts, and they're learning new stuff and all of that. But to be able to essentially transpose something from the real world into fantasy, do it really cleanly so that everybody goes, oh, it's school. Of course I understand school. I don't need this explained to me at all. But then you still get to reveal so much of the world, and you get to build these relationships. It's great. It's great.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that as well.
And obviously the like the map, we've been so many places on there already. Where else will we be going? Is it opening up more?
Yes. Yep, there will be, there will it's actually hard to explain because of spoilers.
Okay.
But yes, there will be more locations. Yeah, let's say
Excellent.
that much.
And like some of the scenes were kind of like they felt very like locked room, kind of like horror elements to them.
Yep.
Like my
Yep.
heart was pounding at certain points, and the labyrinth, like that is such a like every time he ran it, I was just like, come on. Like how did because there's like so much to like how did you think of the labyrinth? What's that?
Yeah. So that was originally, it's funny how these ideas kind of evolve. So very, very, again, this is very early on in just concept. I was like, okay, he's going to go to a school. Cool, I've got that locked down. I feel like I want something a bit unique in his training process. Something there that I can go, okay, this is interesting. This is it's he's not just going to class and sitting there and learning new things. Something that conveys action, and also something that I can then tie into the larger plot. The Labyrinth, it's funny, originally I had it as it was like a device that they were manipulating with Will, and it was still competitive, but it was much smaller scale, and that was a very, very early concept. And then I was playing around with it, and I was going, this isn't working at all. Like, I kind of like the concept, but it's not working. And then and I kind of had it described as this device as like a labyrinth type thing. And I went, well, what if it was bigger? What if he's running like a life-size labyrinth? And that's it. Yeah. And I immediately went, yeah, this is cool. This is just a cool, fun concept. And I could immediately see, okay, I can see how I can work this in. And again, it's like I was saying with Rome, it wasn't quite that eureka moment that Rome was, but it was one of those things where I went, yeah, of course I'm going to do this. And this will work with this and this and this. Great. Perfect.
Definitely.
So
amazing.
Yeah.
So who are your favorite characters to write out of like the supporting ones?
Yeah. I was gonna say, aside from this, I really enjoyed Iden and Calidus. Again, just because writing those friendships, just really, really fun. I did enjoy writing Lannistia. As well. She was just just a fun character to write in a different way to Iden and Calidus, I think. But yeah, I'd say that those are the ones that stand out. But I actually I enjoyed writing a lot of the characters in this book.
So many of them are just so intriguing, but I need to know. I need to know whether they're good. So how long is the series going to be? And so you've said that you're quite close to the end of the second one.
Yep. So I'm contracted for 3. It would not shock me if it's longer. It's funny. It's one of the things I've had this really my poor editor. I feel sorry for him. When we first released the cover and so on, it was called the Hierarchy Trilogy, and I immediately said, no, Joe, we're not calling it a trilogy. Don't call it a trilogy. I did this with Licanius, and look, it worked out okay, but I still would have loved to. Basically, there was no reason, in retrospect with Licanius, I was like, why did I call it trilogy in the title? There's no need to restrict myself in the title. And so I was really, really careful. And that, it had already, at that point, it had already gone up, and it was, on Amazon and stuff. It was the Hierarchy Trilogy, and it's like, no, Joe, you got to go and change this. And it's all good. We got it changed. Now it's just Hierarchy. But and look, it may still be 3 books. I don't know yet. And like I said, I've got the plan. But I mean, even this book, I envisaged this book in my pitch. I went back recently and looked at the pitch that I wrote for this, and it was very accurate to where it ended up, except that I pitched it at like 150,000 words, and it ended up at 240,000.
Oh
Um,
wow.
so a little bit longer, and it wasn't, and that's just me being bad at estimation, basically, because it's I feel like it's a pretty tight book. I don't feel like there's a lot that, I don't feel like there's anything that should be cut from this book. And so, I'm looking at my plan for what's to come and going, well, maybe this will fit in 3 books, but also maybe I should allow room for more.
Yeah, let's have more. Do it. So you've said before that the Mistborn series was like one that kind of got you into writing. What other books have really inspired you? I know you touched on Red Rising, Name of the Wind, and have you had any like recent favorites?
Yeah. I mean, Mistborn and Name of the Wind were the 2 that, in my late 20s, I was drifting away from reading quite a bit. I was still very interested in writing, but just hadn't found anything in ages that really struck a chord with me. And then I read those 2 in quite quick succession and loved both of them. Recent reads. Let's see. I don't read as much as I used to, because I find that writing kind of replaces it in a lot of ways for me as an experience. The last book that I bought that I really enjoyed, which was fairly recent, was Jade City by Fonda Lee.
Oh yeah.
I really enjoyed that. I'll definitely be reading the sequels to that. The Lost War by Justin Lee Anderson.
Okay.
I enjoyed that one, and before that, probably Justice of Kings by Richard Swan.
Do you know what? Every author I interview says Justice of Kings. Everyone loves it.
Yeah. It's great. It's great. It's not often that you find something that really feels different, but is also good.
Yeah, the characters are amazing.
And yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I may have even read an arc of it. It was either an arc or it was quite soon after it came out. And I know the sequel's out, and I keep on going, I've got to read that sequel. I'm sure it's great as well. I've heard good things. But yeah, look, other than those, I'm just trying to think. I read Project Hail Mary recently. That was great.
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, such a good book. And this is what it's rare for me to, like, it seems silly, but it's rare for me to enjoy a standalone. I often read a standalone, and this is the reason that I write these big series, is that I don't feel as invested in it. I kind of get to the end and go, well, that was a pretty good story, and that's good, but now I'm done with it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I really, I really enjoyed Project Hail Mary. I thought that was great. That's certainly one of my more recent favorites, I would say.
So what did you do before you were an author?
I was in a tech startup with a friend of mine. It was very, very hard and very, very boring. So I was look, it was great working with my friend. Like, this is a friend from school, and that's why we were doing it. It was good from that perspective, but I was the coder of that relationship, and and just working in a startup, like I was, during my 20s, I was coding 13 hours a day, maybe. And I was rolling out of bed My computer was in the same room as my bedroom.
Wow.
Sitting at the computer, starting to code. Maybe, take a half-hour break for lunch, sort of thing. It was not fun. It was not
That
healthy.
sounds so intense.
Uh, it was really intense. And look, we made a pretty good fist of it. We learned a lot, and you know, it's one of the things that I look back on now and I go, well, it was valuable, if for no other reason than it really taught me how to work for myself
Yeah.
and how to be disciplined, and how to, because there are so many days when you're writing, like so many days when I get up and I go, I'm not feeling it today.
Yeah.
I don't feel like writing. I just want to go and watch some TV or play some video games, or do something casual. And you can do that. Like, you do have the freedom to do that, but if you do it, it becomes a habit and you just don't get stuff done.
Yeah.
And so I'm very regimented with my schedule, and I'm very much I'm 9 till 5:30, Monday to Friday. That's when I write. And if I sit there for 2 hours going, I've written 50 words and it's all rubbish, then that's okay.
Yeah.
You get days like that, and that's okay. I don't mind that, because for every day that life is like that, you get another day where you start off not feeling it at all, and then something will flip a switch, and then you're writing 1,000 words in an hour, and you go, oh, this is great. A flash of inspiration, and you just sort of had to stick with it a bit. And that's how you get it done. So it's so from that perspective, the time in my 20s spent doing all that work, it wasn't wasted. It wasn't.
Yeah, definitely.
It wasn't something that I regret. But yeah, I certainly wouldn't go back to it.
Yeah. Right. Last question, because I've kept you long enough. We have to talk about that epilogue. Is it an epilogue?
Yep. Yeah. Call it an epilogue. Yep.
So it's so hard to talk about it without spoilers, but wow.
Yep.
Like, did you know that you were going to do that to us?
I did. I very much did. I knew exactly what I want. That's one of the things that was planned in from the start. The exact execution of it, I was like, okay, we'll see how we go. But I knew I wanted to do that because I knew where I wanted the series to go, and that's obviously pretty key for the series. And it's going to be key for every book moving forward in this series. And yeah, like you said, it's really, really hard to talk about without spoilers.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is it's kind of my equivalent, I guess, of in Licanius, I did time travel. And this is my big idea, I guess, for this series. But one of the great things about putting it at the end of the book is because I really wanted this book to be about this and establishing his character. And for that to be, again, you're revealing information, and it's about the timing of that. So yes, it's it ends up as a cool twist, but this first book is really to almost call it like an origin story, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
And yeah, so I think as the series goes on, you'll see more and more about what I'm trying to do in the first book. Man, it's so hard to talk about. I've had this difficulty with every single person I've talked to this book about. Where, it's like, yeah, even when people, ask me what the series is about, and I'm like, oh, well, you can give them the standard answer. You can talk about the first book and and stuff, but you can't go into that side of things because, again, you're spoiling things. But yeah, anyway, I'm very excited. It's working out really well in the second book. It's it's coming together pretty much exactly as I wanted it to, which is great because it was not risky, but it was something obviously I certainly had done before. And I hadn't really seen I didn't have a lot of good examples to run off. But it's working really well. So I'm very pleased.
And I mean, that ending worked because I don't think I've ever been so left so intrigued. I'm so bad with getting around to the next book in a series, but that will be a day one read for me.
Excellent. That's what I want to hear.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. I mean, thank you for the emotional roller coaster that you've put me through over the last week, but thank you so much for coming today to talk to us about it. I know that the Fantasy Fellowship are going to be so excited about picking it up.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
So
excellent.
thank you everyone for listening. Don't forget you can join us in our community Discord. We'll leave the link down below. On Instagram, we are at fantasy_fellowship. Twitter, we are at fanfellowship. We also have a website, www.fantasy-fellowship.co.uk. And if you've enjoyed this author Q&A, be sure to hit like and keep up to date with more Fantasy Fellowship videos. Hit the subscribe button. Thanks again, James.
Thanks, Sarah.